Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Science channel. Tonight, we'll be exploring the fascinating landscape of the human mind, a place filled with wonder, complexity, and endless mysteries. Within us are the patterns of thought, the depths of emotion, and the mechanisms we're all familiar with. But there is so much more than meets the eye. Some of the behaviors we display have roots stretching back millennia, their purposes only now becoming clear. A simple gesture may reveal an entire evolutionary history, and the fleeting sensation of déjà vu may be something far more ordinary than we imagine. The human mind is both familiar and extraordinary, something we experience every moment, yet never fully understand. If you enjoy these quiet explorations, I invite you to like and subscribe or share a simple thought down in the comments. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is rest, settle in, and allow the calm of psychological understanding to carry you. Let's begin. Every thought you have travels through billions of neural connections. When you step into awareness each morning and let your mind awaken to consciousness, the thoughts flowing through your awareness can feel infinite. Yet every single one of those mental events, every perception, every memory, every feeling, travels through a vast network of neural pathways in your brain. Neuroscientists estimate that the human brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons, each one forming thousands of connections with other neurons. That creates a web of communication more complex than any network humanity has ever built. The thoughts beyond, the deeper patterns of consciousness, are simply too intricate for their individual pathways to be traced. Instead, they blur into patterns of activity, waves of electrical and chemical signals. What you experience as a single unified thought is actually the collaboration of millions of neurons firing in synchrony. Just the tiniest sliver of the vast community of cells working together inside your skull. Some memories feel vivid, but were never actually experienced that way. Looking at your memories is like looking into the past. Remembering moves incredibly quickly, but the mind is so complex that even memory takes time to form and can change. Some of the mental images you recall from years ago may have shifted since they were first encoded. A cherished memory from childhood might include details added later, borrowed from photographs or stories told by others. In some cases, the memory itself may be largely reconstructed, pieced together from fragments, each time you recall it. But the feeling keeps returning, still crossing the gulf of time, still reaching you as though nothing has changed. It means your memory is not a perfect recording but a living reconstruction, a dynamic process of what was. Each recollection above you is both accurate and transformed, real and reimagined all at once. Your mind constructs a continuous sense of self from fragmented experiences. For conscious beings, identity has long been a faithful companion. You feel like the same person you were yesterday, last year, a decade ago. But the brain itself slowly changes with every experience, every learned skill, every forgotten detail. Your sense of self has not always been this exact configuration, and it will not remain exactly this way forever. In neuroscience, researchers understand that personal identity emerges from the continuous integration of memories, sensations, and narratives. The brain weaves these fragments into a coherent story. Your identity feels stable when you experience it tonight, steady and continuous. Yet even it is just one version in a long and shifting process written across your lifetime. Ancient humans relied on psychological patterns that still shape us today. Long before written language and complex societies, the mind was humanity's first survival tool. Early humans who could read facial expressions, detect threats quickly, and cooperate in groups were more likely to survive. and pass on their genes. The patterns they developed, the instinct to fear snakes, the tendency to trust familiar faces, the comfort found in social belonging. These responses were not arbitrary but selected through countless generations. Even today, when you feel a flutter of anxiety in a crowd, or experience a surge of warmth when someone smiles at you, you're experiencing echoes of adaptations that kept your ancestors alive. These psychological mechanisms are more than interesting quirks. They are evolutionary achievements woven into the fabric of human nature. When you understand the mind, you're seeing survival strategies refined over hundreds of thousands of years. Your brain uses shortcuts to make sense of an overwhelming world. On a truly complex day, far from simple routines, the amount of information streaming into your awareness can feel staggering. Light, sound, sensation, memory, emotion, all competing for attention. The reason your conscious mind isn't constantly overwhelmed is that your brain has developed efficient shortcuts called heuristics. Imagine processing every individual detail and analyzing every choice from scratch. That's what conscious deliberation would require without these mental efficiencies. The brain learns patterns, makes assumptions, and fills in gaps automatically. This allows you to navigate life smoothly, making thousands of small decisions without exhausting your mental resources. In modern psychology, researchers call these cognitive shortcuts both a gift and a limitation. They allow us to function, but they can also lead to biases and errors. Yet, every mental efficiency is evidence of the brain's remarkable ability to optimize, to streamline, to conserve energy, while keeping you functional in a complex world. Your emotional responses often occur before conscious awareness. When something startles you, you may jump before you even realize what happened. This happens because emotional processing in the brain takes a faster route than conscious thought. The amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure deep in the brain, can trigger fear responses in milliseconds, long before the slower, more analytical cortex has time to assess the situation. This ancient system exists because survival often depended on reacting instantly to threats. A rustle in the grass might be a predator. Those who paused to think carefully often didn't survive to pass on their genes. Today, this means your emotions can feel like they arise from nowhere, surprising even yourself. Understanding this can bring comfort. Your feelings aren't always logical, but they are natural products of brain systems designed for speed over accuracy. Every rapid emotional response is your brain prioritizing your safety, even when modern life rarely requires such urgency. Sleep allows your brain to consolidate memories and clear metabolic waste. The nightly journey into sleep feels like rest, and it is. But while your conscious mind drifts away, your brain remains extraordinarily active. During sleep, particularly during deep, slow-wave sleep, the brain strengthens important memories and prunes away trivial ones. This process, called memory consolidation, helps you retain what matters and forget what doesn't. Beyond memory, recent discoveries show that sleep also allows the brain to flush out metabolic waste products that accumulate during waking hours. The glymphatic system, a waste clearance mechanism, becomes highly active during sleep, washing away proteins and toxins that could otherwise damage neurons. What began as simple rest has revealed itself as essential maintenance, a time when the brain repairs, reorganizes, and prepares for the next day. Each night of sleep is both a retreat and a renewal, a necessary pause in the rhythm of consciousness. Dreams may help process emotions and rehearse challenges. The streak of a dream feels magical, vivid, strange, and gone in an instant. But despite their ephemeral nature, dreams aren't random noise. They're usually fragments of emotional processing and memory integration. During REM sleep, the stage most associated with vivid dreaming, the brain's emotional centers are highly active, while the logical prefrontal cortex is quieter. This creates the surreal, emotionally charged narratives that characterize dreams. Some researchers believe dreams allow us to process difficult emotions in a safe space, rehearsing responses to threats or working through unresolved feelings. Others suggest they help integrate new experiences with existing knowledge. Dreams may be small, but their psychological function is significant. In every strange narrative, the brain is working, sorting through the day's experiences and emotions, preparing you for what comes next. Your perception of time changes based on emotion and attention. Most of us live under perceptions shaped by the rhythms of clocks and calendars. Seconds, minutes, hours, all measured precisely. Yet subjective time, the time you actually experience, is far more fluid. When you're absorbed in an engaging task, hours can feel like minutes. When you're bored or anxious, minutes can stretch unbearably. This happens because your brain doesn't have a perfect internal clock. Instead, it estimates time based on how much attention you're paying and how emotionally aroused you are. Psychologists call this phenomenon temporal perception, and it reveals how malleable our sense of reality truly is. The same duration can feel vastly different depending on your mental state. Every stretched moment of waiting and every compressed hour of flow is evidence that time, as you experience it, is a psychological construction, not an objective truth. Babies are born with innate fears that protected ancestral humans. A baby's first cries, its reflexes, and even its fears tell a story that stretches back millennia. Research shows that infants display innate fear responses to certain stimuli, particularly loud noises and heights. These fears weren't learned, they were inherited, built into the brain through evolution. In ancestral environments, a fear of falling and a startle response to sudden sounds helped infants survive. Those who lacked these instincts were less likely to reach adulthood. Today, these fears feel automatic because they are. Even before language or culture shapes the mind, the brain arrives equipped with ancient wisdom, predispositions carved by natural selection. Each newborn fear is a gift from the past, a survival mechanism passed down through countless generations. The placebo effect demonstrates the power of belief on physical health. When patients take a sugar pill believing it's real medicine, something remarkable often happens. Their symptoms improve, pain decreases, mood lifts. This phenomenon, called the placebo effect, reveals the profound connection between mind and body. Simply expecting relief can trigger genuine physiological changes, releasing natural painkillers like endorphins and activating brain regions associated with healing. The placebo effect doesn't mean symptoms were imaginary. It means the brain has real power to influence bodily processes. Researchers study placebos not as tricks, but as windows into how expectation, belief, and context shape health. The effect is so powerful that clinical trials must account for it when testing new medications. Every improvement from a placebo is evidence that the mind can heal, that belief itself is a form of medicine woven into our biology. Your sense of self can be altered by changing your body's signals. Imagine standing in front of a mirror while someone else stands behind you. If they stroke your back while you watch their hand stroke the mirror, your brain may briefly believe the reflection is you. This phenomenon, called the rubber hand illusion, shows how fragile and constructed your sense of self really is. The brain builds identity from multiple sources: sensory input, memory, and expectation. When those signals conflict or align in unusual ways, Your sense of where you end and the world begins can shift. Similar effects occur in virtual reality, where people can feel embodied in avatars that look nothing like them. These experiences reveal that the self isn't a fixed entity but an ongoing construction, a mental model the brain constantly updates. Your identity feels solid, yet it is remarkably flexible, adaptable, and contingent on the signals your brain receives. Mirror neurons allow you to understand others by simulating their experiences. When you watch someone smile, certain neurons in your brain fire as if you were smiling too. When you see someone in pain, your brain activates some of the same regions involved in experiencing pain yourself. These mirror neurons create a kind of internal simulation, allowing you to understand others not through abstract reasoning but through vicarious experience. This neural mirroring is thought to be foundational for empathy, language learning, and social connection. It allows infants to imitate facial expressions and helps adults navigate the complex social world. The discovery of mirror neurons has reshaped psychology, suggesting that understanding others is not purely cognitive, but deeply embodied. Every empathetic response, every shared emotion, is rooted in the brain's ability to mirror and resonate with the experiences of others. Your unconscious mind processes far more information than your conscious awareness. Consciousness feels expansive, as though you're aware of everything important happening around you. Yet studies show that the vast majority of mental processing occurs outside awareness. Your unconscious mind monitors your environment, regulates your body, retrieves memories, and even solves problems while your conscious mind focuses elsewhere. Experiments reveal that people can process complex information, like the gist of a scene or the emotional tone of a conversation, without consciously noticing details. The unconscious also influences decisions, sometimes guiding choices before conscious reasoning catches up. This doesn't mean you're not in control, but it does mean that much of what you think, feel, and do is shaped by processes you never directly observe. The mind is like an iceberg, consciousness the visible tip, while the vast unconscious bulk operates silently below. Language shapes how you think about the world. The words you speak aren't just labels for pre-existing thoughts. They actively shape how you perceive and remember experiences. Research in linguistic relativity shows that speakers of different languages often think differently about concepts like time, space, and color. For example, languages that describe time spatially, like "the past is behind us," can influence how speakers visualize temporal sequences. Similarly, languages with more specific color terms can make speakers more attuned to certain distinctions. This doesn't mean language determines thought entirely, but it does suggest that the words available to you influence the concepts you find easy to think. Every language offers a slightly different lens on reality, shaping attention and memory in subtle ways. To learn a new language is, in some sense, to learn a new way of thinking. Your mood can be influenced by your facial expressions. It might seem obvious that you smile because you're happy, but research suggests the relationship works in reverse too. When you deliberately smile, even without feeling happy, your mood often improves. This phenomenon, called the facial feedback hypothesis, suggests that the physical act of smiling sends signals to the brain that influence emotional experience. Similarly, frowning can intensify negative feelings. The connection between body and mind is bidirectional. Your emotions shape your expressions, and your expressions shape your emotions. This insight has practical implications. Simply adopting a confident posture or a relaxed facial expression can subtly shift how you feel. The body is not just a vessel for the mind, but an active participant in creating your psychological experience. Nostalgia serves a psychological function beyond mere reminiscence. When you recall a cherished memory from the past, bathed in warm tones and gentle emotions, you're experiencing nostalgia. Long dismissed as mere sentimentality, research now shows that nostalgia serves important psychological functions. It can boost mood, increase feelings of social connection, and provide a sense of continuity in life. When people feel lonely or uncertain, nostalgic memories remind them of meaningful relationships and stable times, offering comfort. Nostalgia also enhances meaning in life, helping people feel that their experiences matter. Far from being a retreat from the present, nostalgia can actually help you navigate current challenges by reconnecting you with your enduring values and relationships. Every wistful memory is not an escape, but a psychological resource, a way the mind nourishes itself by revisiting what has mattered most. Gratitude practice can rewire your brain over time. The simple act of regularly acknowledging things you're grateful for might seem trivial, but neuroscience reveals that gratitude practice can lead to lasting changes in the brain. Studies show that people who regularly practice gratitude show increased activity in brain regions associated with reward and social bonding. Over time, this can shift attention patterns, making it easier to notice positive aspects of life. The effect isn't just psychological but physiological, with gratitude linked to better sleep, reduced inflammation, and improved mood. The brain is remarkably plastic, capable of reorganizing based on repeated experiences. By consistently directing attention toward gratitude, you can gradually reshape neural pathways, making positive thinking feel more natural. Every moment of appreciation is a small investment in long-term mental well-being. Your working memory can hold only a limited amount of information. When you try to remember a phone number or follow complex instructions, you're using working memory, a mental workspace that holds information temporarily. Research shows that working memory is surprisingly limited, typically holding about 4 items at a time. This constraint shapes much of human cognition. It's why you can't multiply large numbers in your head easily, why multitasking is difficult, and why learning new skills requires focused practice. Understanding this limitation can bring relief. Forgetting isn't always a failure. It's often a natural consequence of cognitive constraints. The brain compensates by chunking information into larger units and offloading details to external tools, like notes and devices. Every moment of forgetting is a reminder that the mind, for all its power, operates within boundaries, making efficiency and focus all the more valuable. Cognitive dissonance drives you to resolve conflicting beliefs. Imagine holding 2 contradictory beliefs at once, believing you're a healthy person while regularly skipping exercise. This mental tension is called cognitive dissonance, and it's deeply uncomfortable. The brain seeks consistency, and when beliefs conflict, it generates psychological pressure to resolve the discord. People respond in various ways. They might change a behavior, adjust a belief, or rationalize the conflict away. Cognitive dissonance explains why people sometimes dismiss evidence that challenges their views, or why adopting a small commitment can lead to larger ones. The discomfort of inconsistency is a powerful motivator. It drives learning, behavior change, and even moral development. Every uncomfortable realization that your actions don't match your values is an opportunity for growth, a signal from the mind that something needs to align. The spotlight of attention is narrower than you think. You might feel like you're aware of everything in your field of vision, but attention is far more selective than it seems. Classic studies, like the invisible gorilla experiment, show that people can fail to notice obvious events when their attention is focused elsewhere. A person in a gorilla suit can walk through a scene, and if viewers are counting basketball passes, many won't see it. This phenomenon, called inattentional blindness, reveals that attention works like a spotlight, illuminating only a small area at a time. The rest remains in shadow, processed minimally. This limitation means your experience of the world is always incomplete, a selective sampling rather than a full recording. Understanding this can foster humility. What you notice is shaped as much by where you direct attention as by what's actually there. Stress in moderate amounts can enhance performance. Stress often gets a bad reputation, associated with burnout and health problems, but research shows that stress isn't inherently harmful. In fact, moderate stress can enhance performance, sharpening focus and energizing action. This is described by the Yerkes-Dodson law, which illustrates an inverted U-shaped relationship between stress and performance. Too little stress leads to boredom and underperformance. Too much leads to anxiety and breakdown. But the sweet spot in the middle, moderate arousal, facilitates optimal functioning. This is the feeling athletes call being in the zone or students experience during engaging challenges. Understanding this can change your relationship with stress. Not all tension needs to be eliminated. Sometimes, it's a signal that you're engaged in something meaningful. The key is balance. Enough challenge to motivate, but not so much that it overwhelms. Your beliefs about intelligence can shape your learning. Psychologist Carol Dweck's research on mindsets reveals a powerful truth. People who believe intelligence is fixed, a static trait you're born with, tend to avoid challenges and give up easily. Those who believe intelligence is malleable, something that can grow through effort, tend to embrace challenges and persist through difficulty. This difference in belief, called having a fixed versus growth mindset, profoundly influences learning and achievement. The good news is that mindsets can change. Simply learning that the brain is plastic and that abilities developed through practice can shift how people approach challenges. Every struggle becomes an opportunity rather than a threat. Understanding this can transform education and personal development. The brain's capacity for growth means that effort isn't just a means to an end, it's the mechanism through which ability itself expands. Social connection is as vital to health as diet and exercise. Humans are profoundly social creatures. Research consistently shows that strong social relationships are among the best predictors of long-term health and happiness. Loneliness, by contrast, has been linked to increased risk of heart disease, depression, and even early mortality, with effects comparable to smoking. This isn't surprising from an evolutionary perspective. For most of human history, being part of a group meant survival. Isolation meant vulnerability. The brain evolved to treat social connection as a fundamental need, much like food or sleep. When you feel the warm glow of companionship or the ache of loneliness, you're experiencing ancient mechanisms designed to keep you bonded with others. Every meaningful conversation, every shared laugh, every moment of feeling understood, these aren't just pleasant experiences. They're essential nutrients for psychological and physical well-being. Your sense of fairness emerges early and runs deep. Even young children, before they can articulate complex moral reasoning, display a sense of fairness. Studies show that toddlers react negatively to unequal distributions of resources and prefer puppets who help over those who hinder. This suggests that fairness isn't just a learned social convention, but has deep evolutionary roots. Cooperation was essential for early human groups, and a sense of fairness helped maintain social cohesion. When someone violates fairness norms, you might feel a visceral sense of outrage. That's not just culture talking. It's an ancient psychological mechanism designed to protect cooperative relationships. Understanding this can help make sense of moral emotions. They're not arbitrary. They're products of evolutionary pressures that shaped the social brain. Every instinct toward justice is a testament to the deeply social nature of human psychology. Smiling is contagious because of automatic mimicry. When someone smiles at you, you often smile back without thinking. This automatic mimicry is driven by the brain's mirror neuron system and plays a key role in social bonding. By unconsciously imitating others' expressions, you not only signal affinity, but also gain insight into their emotional state through your own embodied response. This mimicry is so automatic that it can be detected even when people try to suppress it. The contagious nature of smiles, and emotions more generally, helps synchronize social groups. When one person laughs, others join in. When someone looks afraid, others become alert. This emotional resonance creates a kind of social glue, binding individuals into cohesive groups. Every shared smile is a micro-moment of connection, a wordless affirmation of togetherness rooted in the brain's social wiring. The mere exposure effect makes familiarity breed liking. You might assume you like things because they have inherent appeal. But research on the mere exposure effect shows that simply encountering something repeatedly can increase your liking for it, even if you don't consciously remember the exposures. This applies to faces, music, words, even abstract shapes. The effect is robust and occurs across cultures. Evolutionarily, it makes sense. Familiar things are generally safer than novel ones. By favoring the familiar, your ancestors avoided potential threats. Today, this bias influences everything from consumer preferences to relationship formation. It's why songs grow on you, why you warm to colleagues over time, and why logos and brands invest in repeated exposure. Understanding the mere exposure effect can make you more aware of how your preferences form. Liking isn't always about inherent quality. Sometimes it's simply about frequency and familiarity. Your brain predicts the future to make sense of the present. Perception feels immediate, as though you're directly experiencing the world in real time. But neuroscientists have discovered that the brain is constantly generating predictions about what will happen next, using past experience to anticipate sensory input. When predictions match reality, perception flows smoothly. When they don't, you experience surprise, and the brain updates its models. This predictive processing framework explains many phenomena. It's why you don't notice your own eye movements, why you can finish other people's sentences, and why unexpected events capture attention. The brain is not a passive receiver of information, but an active predictor, constantly constructing your experience based on what it expects. Every moment of perception is a blend of sensation and prediction, reality filtered through the lens of experience. Laughter triggers the release of endorphins and strengthens social bonds. The sound of laughter is unmistakable, joyful, contagious, and deeply human. But laughter is more than an expression of amusement. It's a complex social signal with real physiological effects. When you laugh, your brain releases endorphins, natural chemicals that reduce pain and create feelings of pleasure. This is why laughter can feel physically relieving. Beyond the individual, laughter serves crucial social functions. It signals playfulness, diffuses tension, and strengthens group cohesion. Shared laughter creates a sense of unity, a feeling that you're on the same wavelength with others. Interestingly, most laughter occurs not in response to jokes but during ordinary conversation, where it acts as social lubricant. Every spontaneous laugh is both a personal release and a social gift, a way of connecting with others through shared joy. Music activates reward centers in the brain, similar to food and other pleasures. When a favorite song plays and you feel that rush of pleasure, your brain's reward system is lighting up. Neuroimaging studies show that listening to music activates the same dopamine pathways involved in eating, sex, and other primary rewards. This helps explain why music feels so deeply satisfying and why it has been a universal part of human culture. Music also engages multiple brain regions simultaneously, involving areas responsible for emotion, memory, motor control, and pattern recognition. This widespread activation makes music a powerful tool for mood regulation, memory retrieval, and even therapeutic interventions. Whether it's the swell of a symphony or the beat of a favorite song, music has direct access to the brain's emotional core. Every melody you love is a key that unlocks ancient reward circuits, connecting sound to feeling in ways that transcend language. Curiosity is driven by a desire to resolve uncertainty. That feeling of wanting to know, to understand, to explore, that's curiosity. And psychologists have discovered that it's driven by a specific kind of motivation. The brain finds uncertainty uncomfortable, at least at moderate levels, and seeks to resolve it. When you encounter a gap in your knowledge, something you almost understand but not quite, curiosity is triggered. This motivates exploration and learning. Interestingly, curiosity itself can be rewarding. The act of seeking information activates the brain's reward pathways, even before you find the answer. This is why cliffhangers work in stories, and why you might stay up late searching for answers online. Curiosity is not just intellectual interest. It's a drive system, one that propels learning and discovery. Every question you ask, every mystery that draws you in, is evidence of the brain's intrinsic motivation to understand the world. You are more likely to remember emotionally charged events. Not all memories are created equal. Events accompanied by strong emotions, whether joy, fear, sadness, or excitement, tend to be remembered more vividly and accurately than neutral events. This happens because the amygdala, the brain's emotional center, enhances memory consolidation when emotions are high. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. Remembering emotionally significant events, like dangers or sources of joy, helped ancestors survive and thrive. Today, this means your most vivid memories are often tied to emotional peaks, first loves, losses, moments of triumph or fear. These flashbulb memories can feel incredibly clear, though research shows they're not always as accurate as they seem. Still, the emotional enhancement of memory serves an important function. It helps you learn from experiences that matter most, ensuring that emotionally significant lessons are not easily forgotten. The concept of flow describes optimal psychological experience. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi identified a state he called flow, characterized by complete absorption in an activity, loss of self-consciousness, and a sense of timelessness. During flow, challenges and skills are perfectly balanced. The task is difficult enough to be engaging, but not so hard that it's overwhelming. Artists, athletes, musicians, and people in all domains report flow states, describing them as among the most satisfying experiences of their lives. Neurologically, flow involves reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex, the brain region associated with self-monitoring and conscious control. This allows more automatic, intuitive processing. Flow states are not just pleasant. They're associated with peak performance and creativity. Understanding how to cultivate flow by balancing challenge and skill, minimizing distractions, and engaging in intrinsically motivating tasks can enhance both well-being and productivity. Every flow state is a glimpse of what the mind can do when fully engaged. Your intuition is often your unconscious mind detecting patterns. Intuition can feel mysterious, a gut feeling that you can't quite explain. But research suggests that intuition is often the result of unconscious pattern recognition. Your brain constantly absorbs information from the environment, much of it outside conscious awareness. Over time, it detects regularities and patterns. When you encounter a familiar situation, your unconscious mind recognizes the pattern and generates a feeling, a sense that something is right or wrong. This happens faster than conscious reasoning, which is why intuition feels immediate. Experts in any field, from chess players to doctors, often rely heavily on intuition, which is really their accumulated experience, processed rapidly and unconsciously. Intuition isn't magic, it's expertise. And while it can be remarkably accurate, it's also susceptible to biases. Understanding intuition as unconscious processing helps demystify it and highlights the importance of experience in developing good judgment. Children learn language with astonishing speed and efficiency. Watching a child acquire language is one of the most remarkable demonstrations of the human brain's learning capacity. By age 3, most children have learned thousands of words and grasped complex grammatical rules, all without formal instruction. This happens through a combination of innate predispositions, what linguist Noam Chomsky called a universal grammar, and social interaction. Babies are born with the ability to distinguish all possible speech sounds, though they quickly specialize in the sounds of their native language. They learn by listening, imitating, and receiving feedback. The process is so natural and effortless that it seems almost magical, but it reflects the brain's profound plasticity during early development, a period when neural connections form at extraordinary rates. Every word a child learns is a testament to the brain's capacity for rapid, intuitive learning, a capacity that, while diminished in adulthood, never entirely disappears. Color perception is partly constructed by your brain. When you see a red apple, you might think you're perceiving an objective property of the world. But color is not entirely in the object. It's partly constructed by your brain. Light of different wavelengths enters your eye, but the experience of red, the subjective quality of redness, is created by neural processing. Interestingly, color perception can be influenced by context. The same physical wavelength can appear different depending on surrounding colors, lighting, and even your expectations. The famous dress illusion, where people saw the same image as either blue and black or white and gold, revealed just how much interpretation is involved in perception. Your brain doesn't passively record the world. It actively constructs your experience of it, filling in gaps, making assumptions, and creating a coherent perceptual reality. Every color you see is a collaboration between world and mind. The bystander effect reveals how social context influences helping behavior. In 1964, Kitty Genovese was attacked in New York, while dozens of people reportedly heard her cries. The case sparked research into why people sometimes fail to help in emergencies. Psychologists discovered the bystander effect, the phenomenon where individuals are less likely to help when others are present. This occurs for several reasons. People look to others for cues about how to respond, a process called pluralistic ignorance. They also experience diffusion of responsibility, assuming someone else will act. The bystander effect doesn't mean people are callous. It reveals how powerfully social context shapes behavior. Understanding this can actually make you more likely to help. Knowing about diffusion of responsibility can prompt you to take personal responsibility. Every act of helping, especially in a crowd, is a conscious choice to override powerful social psychological forces. Stereotype threat can impair performance when negative stereotypes are salient. When people are reminded of negative stereotypes about a group they belong to, their performance can suffer. This phenomenon, called stereotype threat, has been demonstrated across many domains. For example, women perform worse on math tests when told that women typically underperform, and black students score lower on standardized tests when race is made salient beforehand. The mechanism involves anxiety and cognitive load. Worrying about confirming a stereotype consumes mental resources that could be used for the task. Importantly, stereotype threat is situational, not a reflection of actual ability. Interventions that reduce threat, such as reframing tasks or affirming values, can eliminate performance gaps. Understanding stereotype threat highlights how social contexts and identities shape individual performance. It reminds us that ability is not just about what's inside a person, but also about the environment in which they're performing. The peak-end rule shapes how you remember experiences. When you recall a past experience, like a vacation or a medical procedure, your memory isn't a simple average of all moments. Instead, it's disproportionately influenced by 2 points: the peak, the most intense moment, and the end, how the experience concluded. This is called the peak-end rule, and it can lead to surprising judgments. A painful medical procedure that ends on a less painful note may be remembered as better than a shorter but more consistently painful one. Similarly, a vacation with one amazing day and a pleasant departure might be remembered more fondly than a longer trip with steadier but less intense enjoyment. Understanding this can help shape experiences for yourself and others. If you want an event to be remembered positively, focus on creating peak moments and ensuring a strong ending. Memory is not a recording. It's a summary, and the brain uses shortcuts to construct that summary. Your self-control is a limited resource that can be depleted. Have you ever noticed that after a day of resisting temptations or making difficult decisions, you have less willpower left for evening challenges? This phenomenon, sometimes called ego depletion, suggests that self-control draws on a limited mental resource. Studies show that exerting willpower in one domain can reduce self-control in another. After resisting cookies, people might give up more quickly on a difficult puzzle. However, recent research has complicated this picture, suggesting that beliefs about willpower matter too. If you believe willpower is unlimited, you may experience less depletion. Regardless of the exact mechanism, most people experience mental fatigue after sustained effort. Understanding this can help you plan your day strategically, tackling difficult tasks when your mental resources are fresh, and being compassionate with yourself when willpower wanes. Every moment of self-control is an expenditure, and like any resource, it requires replenishment. Mental simulation helps you prepare for future events. When you imagine how a future event might unfold, you're engaging in mental simulation, a powerful cognitive tool. Athletes visualize their performance before competing. Students mentally rehearse presentations. Therapists guide clients through imagined scenarios to reduce anxiety. Mental simulation works because the brain doesn't sharply distinguish between imagined and real experiences. Visualizing an action activates many of the same neural pathways as performing it. This allows practice without physical execution and prepares you emotionally for upcoming challenges. Mental simulation can also improve problem solving by letting you explore different strategies mentally before committing to one. However, it's important to simulate realistically. Overly optimistic fantasies can reduce motivation, while realistic simulation, including potential obstacles, enhances preparedness. Every time you imagine a future scenario, you're not just daydreaming. You're training your brain and shaping how you'll respond when the moment arrives. Confirmation bias leads you to favor information that supports your beliefs. Once you form a belief, you tend to notice and remember information that confirms it, while overlooking contradictory evidence. This is called confirmation bias, one of the most pervasive cognitive biases. It affects everyone, from scientists to everyday decision-makers. Confirmation bias occurs partly because it's cognitively easier to process information that fits existing schemas, and partly because challenging cherished beliefs is psychologically uncomfortable. The result is that people often become more confident in incorrect beliefs over time, as they selectively attend to confirming evidence. Being aware of confirmation bias is the first step to mitigating it. Actively seeking disconfirming evidence, considering alternative explanations, and engaging with people who hold different views can help. But overcoming confirmation bias requires deliberate effort. The mind's default is to protect and reinforce what it already believes, a tendency that shapes everything from personal opinions to scientific progress. The sunk cost fallacy keeps you committed to losing endeavors. Imagine you've invested time or money into a project that's clearly not working out. Rationally, you should cut your losses and move on. But often, people continue investing because of what they've already put in. This is the sunk cost fallacy, the tendency to let past investments, which cannot be recovered, influence future decisions. Psychologically, abandoning a project feels like admitting failure and wasting the prior investment. But economically, sunk costs are irrelevant. What matters is future costs and benefits. The sunk cost fallacy affects everything from business decisions to personal relationships. Recognizing it can free you from unproductive commitments. The money, time, or effort already spent is gone regardless of what you do next. The question is always, what decision serves you best moving forward? Every time you walk away from a bad investment, you're demonstrating psychological flexibility, prioritizing future well-being over past losses. Mindfulness meditation can change brain structure over time. Mindfulness, the practice of paying attention to the present moment without judgment, has been studied extensively. Research shows that regular mindfulness meditation is associated with changes in brain structure, particularly increases in gray matter density in regions involved in attention, emotion, regulation, and self-awareness. Even relatively brief periods of practice, just weeks, can produce measurable changes. Functionally, mindfulness is linked to reduced stress, improved focus, and greater emotional resilience. These benefits occur because mindfulness trains the brain to respond rather than react, creating space between stimulus and response. The practice isn't about emptying the mind, but about changing your relationship with thoughts and emotions. Instead of being carried away by them, you observe them. This shift in perspective is both simple and profound. Every moment of mindfulness is a small act of training, gradually reshaping neural pathways toward greater awareness and balance. Your brain is capable of neuroplasticity throughout life. For a long time, scientists believed that the adult brain was relatively fixed, unable to generate new neurons or reorganize significantly. But research over the past few decades has revealed that the brain remains plastic throughout life. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new connections, occurs continuously. Learning new skills, even in old age, can lead to structural brain changes. Experiences shape neural architecture. This plasticity is most pronounced during childhood, but never entirely disappears. Stroke patients can recover lost functions as other brain regions compensate. Musicians show enlarged areas related to motor control and audition. Even learning a new language or instrument in adulthood can create measurable changes. Neuroplasticity means that you are never locked into fixed patterns. The brain remains adaptable, capable of growth and change. Every new skill, Every effort to learn or adapt is a testament to the brain's lifelong capacity for transformation. Social comparison shapes your self-esteem and motivation. Humans are constantly comparing themselves to others, a process called social comparison. Psychologist Leon Festinger proposed that people evaluate themselves by comparing to others when objective standards are unavailable. This comparison can be upward, to those doing better, or downward, to those doing worse. Upward comparison can be motivating, providing goals and inspiration, but it can also harm self-esteem if the gap feels unbridgeable. Downward comparison can boost self-esteem, but may also lead to complacency. Social media has intensified social comparison, as people are constantly exposed to curated highlights of others' lives. Understanding social comparison can help you navigate its effects. Recognizing when comparisons are helpful versus harmful allows you to use them strategically. Remember that everyone's journey is different, and comparisons are often based on incomplete information. Every moment of comparison is a choice, and choosing wisely can protect your well-being while fostering growth. The Zeigarnik effect makes unfinished tasks linger in your mind. Have you noticed that incomplete tasks seem to occupy your thoughts more than finished ones? This is called the Zeigarnik effect, named after psychologist Bloomer Zeigarnik, who observed that waiters remembered unpaid orders better than paid ones. Unfinished tasks create a kind of cognitive tension. The mind wants closure, and until it's achieved, the task remains mentally active. This can be both useful and burdensome. On one hand, it helps you remember what needs doing. On the other hand, it can contribute to mental clutter and stress. Interestingly, even small progress toward completing a task can reduce this tension. Making a plan can serve as a kind of mental closure, quieting the nagging feeling. Understanding the Zeigarnik effect can help you manage your mental workspace. Completing small tasks, or at least planning when you'll address them, can free up cognitive resources and reduce background stress. Every unfinished task is a small weight on the mind, and closure brings relief. Locus of control affects how you interpret successes and failures. People differ in where they locate the causes of events. Those with an internal locus of control believe their actions significantly influence outcomes. Those with an external locus of control attribute outcomes more to luck, fate, or external circumstances. This distinction matters because it shapes how people respond to challenges. Those with an internal locus tend to be more motivated, persistent, and proactive because they believe effort matters. Those with an external locus may feel more helpless and less motivated. However, an excessively internal locus can lead to self-blame for things beyond your control, while some external attribution can protect self-esteem after failures. The healthiest approach is often a balance, recognizing the areas where you have control, while accepting the limits of that control. Understanding your locus of control can help you adjust it when needed, fostering agency without unrealistic self-blame. Learned helplessness occurs when repeated failure leads to passivity. In studies with animals, psychologist Martin Seligman discovered that when subjects were repeatedly exposed to unavoidable aversive events, they eventually stopped trying to escape, even when escape became possible. This phenomenon, called learned helplessness, has profound implications for understanding human depression and motivation. When people experience repeated failures or uncontrollable negative events, they may learn that their actions don't matter, leading to passivity and resignation. This learned helplessness can generalize, affecting motivation across domains. The good news is that learned helplessness can be unlearned. Experiencing control and success in even small areas can begin to reverse the pattern. Therapy approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy, specifically target the thought patterns underlying helplessness. Understanding learned helplessness highlights the importance of agency and control in mental health. Every experience of effective action is an antidote to helplessness, rebuilding the belief that effort matters. The availability heuristic makes recent or vivid events feel more likely. When judging the likelihood of events, people rely on examples that come easily to mind. This mental shortcut is called the availability heuristic. If you recently heard about a plane crash, you might overestimate the danger of flying. If you know someone who won the lottery, you might overestimate your own chances. The availability heuristic is efficient. Recent and vivid events are often relevant, but it can lead to biased judgments. Media coverage, for instance, can make rare events like terrorism feel more common than they are, while underreported risks, like heart disease, receive less attention. Being aware of the availability heuristic can help you make better decisions. When assessing risks or probabilities, it's worth asking whether your judgment is based on actual statistics or just on what easily comes to mind. Every quick judgment is a potential opportunity for this bias to operate, and awareness is the first step toward correction. Anchoring effects influence judgments and decisions. When making decisions, people are often influenced by the first piece of information they encounter, even if it's irrelevant. This is called the anchoring effect. For example, if asked whether a product costs more or less than $100 before estimating its actual price, your estimate will be pulled toward that initial anchor. Anchoring occurs in negotiations, pricing, and even self-assessments. The initial number, even when arbitrary, sets a reference point. The effect is remarkably robust, affecting even experts who should know better. Understanding anchoring can help you avoid being manipulated and use it strategically. In negotiations, making the first offer can set a favorable anchor. When evaluating options, being aware that your judgment may be anchored can prompt you to consider a wider range. Every initial number is a potential anchor, silently shaping the judgments that follow. Cognitive load affects decision quality and self-control. Your brain has limited processing capacity. When you're juggling multiple tasks or dealing with complex information, you're experiencing high cognitive load. Research shows that high cognitive load impairs decision-making, reduces self-control, and increases reliance on stereotypes and heuristics. When your mind is taxed, you fall back on simpler, automatic processes. This is why it's harder to resist temptation when you're tired or stressed. It's also why multitasking often reduces performance across tasks. Understanding cognitive load can help you structure your environment and schedule. Important decisions and tasks requiring willpower are best tackled when cognitive load is low, when you're rested and free from distractions. Reducing unnecessary complexity, like simplifying choices or decluttering your workspace, can free up mental resources. Every reduction in cognitive load is a gift to your future self, preserving capacity for what truly matters. The halo effect causes one positive trait to color overall impressions. When you find someone attractive or learn they excel in one area, you tend to assume they have other positive qualities too. This is the halo effect, a cognitive bias where one salient positive trait influences judgments about unrelated traits. Attractive people are often perceived as more intelligent and kind. Experts in one field are assumed to be knowledgeable in others. The halo effect operates unconsciously, shaping everything from hiring decisions to jury verdicts. It's a mental shortcut, inferring overall quality from limited information. While sometimes accurate, it can lead to errors, overlooking flaws, or overestimating abilities. Being aware of the halo effect can help you make more nuanced judgments. When forming impressions, deliberately consider each trait independently. Every global judgment is susceptible to the halo effect, and critical thinking requires resisting the pull of first impressions. Your perception of pain is influenced by psychological factors. Pain feels like a purely physical sensation, but it's actually a complex interaction between body and mind. The same physical stimulus can be experienced as more or less painful depending on psychological context. Attention, expectation, emotion, and meaning all modulate pain perception. When you're distracted, pain often feels less intense. When you're anxious or focused on it, it intensifies. Placebos can reduce pain, and the meaning you assign to pain, viewing it as temporary healing versus permanent damage, affects how you experience it. This doesn't mean pain is imaginary. It means pain is constructed by the brain from multiple sources of information. Understanding this can actually help with pain management. Techniques like distraction, reframing, and relaxation can genuinely reduce experienced pain. Every painful sensation is filtered through psychological processes, making the mind a potential ally in managing physical discomfort. Imposter syndrome affects high achievers despite their accomplishments. Many successful people secretly feel like frauds, believing they don't deserve their achievements and fearing they'll be exposed. This is called imposter syndrome. It's surprisingly common, particularly among high achievers. Imposter syndrome involves attributing success to luck or external factors rather than ability, and interpreting failures as evidence of inadequacy. This creates a cycle where accomplishments don't reduce self-doubt. Psychologists recognize that imposter syndrome often stems from perfectionism, fear of failure, and societal messages about competence. Interestingly, awareness that others share these feelings can be relieving. Imposter syndrome thrives in isolation. Talking about it often reveals how common it is. Understanding imposter syndrome can help you recognize distorted thinking patterns and develop more balanced self-assessment. Every feeling of being a fraud, when examined critically, often reveals itself as the mind's harsh and inaccurate judgment rather than objective truth. Optimism bias makes you believe you're less likely than others to experience negative events. Most people believe they're less likely than average to experience negative events, like illness, accidents, or divorce. This is called optimism bias. It's a pervasive tendency that, while sometimes protective, can lead to poor decisions. Optimism bias can reduce preventive behavior, like skipping health screenings, because people underestimate their personal risk. It can also contribute to unrealistic planning, underestimating how long projects will take or how much they'll cost. However, moderate optimism is linked to better mental health and resilience. The key is balanced optimism, acknowledging real risks while maintaining hope. Being aware of optimism bias can help you make more realistic assessments. When evaluating personal risks, it's worth asking whether you're being truly objective or falling prey to the bias that tells you bad things happen to others, not you. Every overly rosy prediction is an opportunity to recalibrate toward reality. Your identity is shaped by the stories you tell about yourself. Who you are is not just a collection of facts, but a narrative. The stories you tell yourself about your past, your traits, and your future shape your sense of identity. Psychologists recognize that humans are natural storytellers, constantly constructing and revising autobiographical narratives. These narratives give life meaning and coherence, connecting disparate experiences into a unified self. Importantly, how you tell your story matters. Framing past challenges as growth experiences versus sources of shame affects your self-concept. Narrative therapy, a therapeutic approach, helps people rewrite their stories in more empowering ways. This doesn't mean denying reality, but reinterpreting it. Your life story is not fixed. It's an ongoing construction, and you have some authorial control. Every time you reflect on who you are, you're not just discovering a truth, but actively creating the narrative of your identity. Ego defenses protect you from psychological discomfort. When faced with threatening information or uncomfortable emotions, your mind employs defense mechanisms, unconscious strategies that protect the ego. Sigmund Freud and his daughter Anna Freud identified many defenses. Repression pushes threatening thoughts out of awareness. Projection attributes your own unacceptable feelings to others. Rationalization provides logical-sounding but false justifications for behavior. While defenses can be adaptive in the short term, protecting you from overwhelming distress, over-reliance can prevent growth and insight. Healthier defenses, like humor and sublimation, transform distress into something constructive. Understanding defense mechanisms can increase self-awareness. When you notice yourself making excuses, blaming others, or avoiding certain topics, you might be employing a defense. This awareness creates an opportunity to face discomfort more directly. Every defense mechanism is the mind's attempt to protect you, even if the protection sometimes comes at the cost of truth. Rituals and routines provide psychological comfort and structure. Humans across cultures engage in rituals, repetitive behaviors imbued with meaning. From morning routines to religious ceremonies, rituals serve important psychological functions. They provide predictability in an uncertain world, reducing anxiety. They mark transitions, helping you shift between roles or states. They can also enhance performance through preparation and focus. Research shows that even arbitrary rituals, like a specific pre-task routine, can reduce anxiety and improve outcomes, likely by increasing feelings of control. The comfort of rituals comes partly from their familiarity and partly from the sense that you're doing something purposeful. Understanding the psychological power of rituals can help you design personal routines that support well-being. Whether it's a morning coffee ritual or a bedtime routine, these small acts create structure and signal to your brain that certain experiences are beginning or ending. Every ritual is a touchstone of stability in the flow of daily life. The fundamental attribution error leads you to underestimate situational influences. When you observe someone else's behavior, you tend to attribute it to their personality or character, rather than to situational factors. If someone cuts you off in traffic, you might think they're rude, rather than considering they might be rushing to an emergency. This is called the fundamental attribution error. Interestingly, when explaining your own behavior, you're more likely to cite situational factors. You cut someone off because you were late, not because you're rude. This asymmetry reflects a broader tendency to see others' actions as reflecting stable traits, while seeing your own as responses to circumstances. The fundamental attribution error can lead to unfair judgments and interpersonal conflicts. Being aware of it encourages more charitable interpretations. When someone behaves badly, considering situational pressures can foster empathy. Every hasty judgment about another person's character is an opportunity to pause and consider what circumstances might be at play. The spotlight effect makes you overestimate how much others notice you. Have you ever felt intensely self-conscious, certain that everyone is noticing your mistake or awkward moment? This feeling reflects the spotlight effect, the tendency to overestimate how much others are paying attention to you. In reality, most people are focused on themselves, not scrutinizing you. Research demonstrates this clearly. People asked to wear an embarrassing shirt estimated that many more people noticed than actually did. The spotlight effect occurs because you're the center of your own experience. making it hard to recognize you're not the center of others' experiences. Understanding the spotlight effect can reduce social anxiety. That embarrassing thing you did, most people didn't notice, and those who did have, probably forgotten. Everyone is too busy worrying about their own spotlight to focus much on yours. Every moment of self-consciousness is an opportunity to remember that you're less observed than you feel. Reciprocity creates a sense of obligation to return favors. When someone does something for you, you feel obligated to return the favor. This is the norm of reciprocity, a powerful social principle present in virtually all cultures. Reciprocity binds communities together, encouraging cooperation and exchange, but it can also be exploited. Salespeople offer free samples, knowing that recipients will feel obligated to buy. Small favors create psychological pressure to comply with later requests. The reciprocity norm is so strong that people often return favors even when the initial act was unwanted. Understanding reciprocity can help you navigate social interactions more consciously. You can choose when to honor the obligation and when to recognize manipulation. It also highlights the positive power of generosity. Small acts of kindness create ripples, as recipients feel moved to pass kindness forward. Every favor is a thread in the social fabric, binding people in webs of mutual obligation and support. Intrinsic motivation leads to greater persistence than external rewards. Motivation comes in two main forms. Intrinsic motivation arises from internal satisfaction, enjoying the activity itself. Extrinsic motivation comes from external rewards or pressures, money, grades, approval. Research shows that intrinsic motivation is more sustainable and often leads to higher quality performance. When people are intrinsically motivated, they persist longer, show more creativity, and experience greater satisfaction. Interestingly, adding external rewards to intrinsically motivating activities can sometimes undermine intrinsic motivation, a phenomenon called the overjustification effect. When kids who love drawing are paid for it, they may come to see it as work rather than play. Understanding this distinction can help you cultivate intrinsic motivation in yourself and others. Connecting tasks to personal values, emphasizing autonomy, and fostering mastery all enhance intrinsic motivation. Every moment spent doing something for its own sake, rather than for external reward, nourishes deeper and more enduring engagement. Choice overload can lead to decision paralysis and dissatisfaction. Modern life offers abundant choices, from cereal brands to career paths, but research shows that too many choices can be overwhelming. This phenomenon, called choice overload, or the paradox of choice, can lead to decision paralysis, where people struggle to choose at all, and to dissatisfaction, because more options create higher expectations and more opportunity for regret. Psychologist Barry Schwartz argues that while some choice is empowering, excessive choice creates anxiety. Strategies for managing choice overload include setting criteria in advance, satisficing, choosing good enough rather than perfect, and limiting options deliberately. Understanding choice overload can help you simplify decisions. Sometimes fewer options lead to greater satisfaction. The abundance of modern life is a privilege, but it comes with psychological costs. Every deliberate constraint you place on choices, like deciding in advance or delegating decisions, can free mental energy and increase contentment with your selections. Emotional intelligence involves recognizing and managing emotions in yourself and others. Intelligence isn't just about cognitive abilities like reasoning and memory. Emotional intelligence, the ability to perceive, understand, and manage emotions, is equally important. People high in emotional intelligence are better at reading social cues, regulating their own emotions, and navigating interpersonal relationships. They recognize subtle emotional signals in others, empathize effectively, and respond appropriately. Emotional intelligence can be developed through practice, self-reflection, and feedback. It involves skills like pausing before reacting, naming emotions precisely, and considering others' perspectives. Research links emotional intelligence to better mental health, relationship quality, and even job performance. Understanding emotional intelligence highlights that intelligence is multifaceted. Success and well-being depend not just on what you know, but on how you handle emotions. Every moment of emotional awareness and regulation is an exercise in emotional intelligence, strengthening a capacity that shapes every aspect of life. The self-fulfilling prophecy shows how expectations shape outcomes. When you expect something to happen, you often behave in ways that make it more likely. This is called a self-fulfilling prophecy. If a teacher believes a student is talented, they may give more attention and encouragement, helping the student succeed. If you expect to fail at a task, your anxiety and lack of effort may ensure that outcome. The classic Pygmalion effect demonstrates this in education, where teacher expectations significantly influence student performance. Self-fulfilling prophecies can be positive or negative. Recognizing them can help you harness their power. By cultivating positive expectations while remaining realistic, you can create conditions for success. Conversely, being aware of negative expectations can help you interrupt the cycle. Every expectation is a lens that shapes perception and behavior. When you expect the best, you often act in ways that bring it about, demonstrating the mind's power to shape reality through belief and action. Cognitive reappraisal is a powerful emotion regulation strategy. When you experience a negative emotion, you have choices about how to respond. Cognitive reappraisal involves reinterpreting the situation to change its emotional impact. Instead of seeing a setback as a disaster, you might view it as a learning opportunity. Research shows that reappraisal is one of the healthiest emotion regulation strategies, more effective than suppression, which involves hiding emotions without addressing their source. Reappraisal doesn't deny feelings, but reframes the situation, changing the emotional response at its root. This strategy is associated with better mental health, stronger relationships, and greater resilience. Learning to reappraise takes practice. It involves questioning automatic interpretations and considering alternatives. Every difficult emotion is an opportunity to practice reappraisal. By asking how else you might view the situation, you can transform emotional experience, demonstrating the power of perspective in shaping how you feel. Habits form through repetition and contextual cues. Much of daily behavior is habitual, performed automatically, without conscious thought. Habits form through a process of repetition in a consistent context. The brain learns associations between cues, like a location or time of day, and responses, like brushing teeth. Over time, the behavior becomes automatic, requiring little cognitive effort. This frees mental resources for other tasks, but it also means habits can be hard to change. Breaking bad habits or forming new ones requires conscious effort and often changing the context or cues. Research suggests it takes weeks or even months for new behaviors to become truly automatic. Understanding habit formation can help you design environments that support desired behaviors. Want to exercise more? Keep workout clothes visible. Every habit is a learned association, and with awareness and effort, you can reshape the neural pathways that guide daily behavior, creating patterns that serve your goals. The mere presence of others can enhance performance on simple tasks. When other people are around, even as passive observers, your performance can change. This is called social facilitation. For simple or well-learned tasks, the presence of others tends to enhance performance. Athletes often perform better in front of crowds. Students may solve easy problems faster with others nearby. However, for complex or unfamiliar tasks, the presence of others can impair performance, increasing anxiety and errors. This happens because the presence of others increases arousal, which energizes dominant responses. If the dominant response is correct, performance improves. If it's incorrect, performance worsens. Understanding social facilitation can help you manage your environment. When practicing new skills, solitude might be better. When performing well-learned tasks, an audience might boost performance. Every social context subtly influences your psychological state, shaping what you can accomplish in ways you might not consciously notice. Groupthink occurs when desire for harmony overrides critical thinking. In cohesive groups, especially under stress or with strong leadership, members may suppress dissenting opinions to maintain harmony. This phenomenon, called groupthink, can lead to poor decisions because alternative viewpoints are not considered. Classic examples include political and business disasters where warning signs were ignored because no one wanted to challenge the group consensus. Groupthink symptoms include an illusion of invulnerability, pressure on dissenters, and self-censorship. Preventing groupthink requires deliberately encouraging diverse perspectives, assigning someone to play devil's advocate, and creating a culture where dissent is valued. Understanding groupthink highlights the tension between social cohesion and critical thinking. Groups can be wiser than individuals, but only when diversity of thought is preserved. Every unchallenged consensus is a potential site of groupthink, a reminder that harmony should not come at the expense of rigorous analysis. The contrast effect influences judgments by comparison. Your judgments are not absolute, but relative, shaped by context and comparison. The contrast effect describes how you perceive something differently, depending on what you've just experienced. A moderately attractive person seems less attractive after viewing a highly attractive person. A reasonable price seems high after seeing a low price. This effect influences everything from consumer behavior to personal satisfaction. After staying in a luxury hotel, your own home might feel shabby, even if nothing about it changed. Understanding the contrast effect can help you manage expectations and appreciate what you have. Being mindful of comparisons, especially on social media where you're constantly exposed to highlights of others' lives, can protect well-being. Every judgment is contextual, and recognizing this can help you make more balanced assessments that reflect intrinsic qualities rather than arbitrary contrasts. Your present self and future self are often in conflict. Imagine your future self. What do they wish your present self would do? Likely, eat healthier, save more money, exercise regularly. Yet present self often chooses immediate gratification over long-term benefit. This tension between present and future self is a fundamental psychological challenge. Behavioral economists describe it as time inconsistency or present bias. You want good outcomes in the future, but prefer immediate rewards now. This explains procrastination, undersaving, and unhealthy habits. Strategies to help present self-serve future self include pre-commitment, making choices now that constrain future behavior, and vividness, making future consequences feel more real. Understanding this internal conflict can foster self-compassion. You're not weak-willed. You're navigating a psychological design challenge. Every choice that prioritizes long-term well-being over immediate pleasure is a victory for your future self, a gift across time. The default effect shows that people stick with preset options. When making decisions, people tend to accept default options, whatever is preset or suggested, even when alternatives are available. This default effect is remarkably powerful. In countries where organ donation is opt-out, donation rates are much higher than in opt-in countries, even though people are free to choose either way. Defaults shape everything from retirement savings to privacy settings. They work because changing from the default requires effort and decision-making, and people often interpret defaults as implicit recommendations. Understanding the default effect can help you design better environments. Want to encourage a behavior? Make it the default. Conversely, being aware that defaults shape your choices can prompt you to evaluate whether the default truly serves your interests. Every default is a subtle nudge, and recognizing this gives you power to choose more consciously rather than passively accepting what's presented. Anchoring and adjustment lead to insufficient correction. When you start from an initial value, an anchor, and adjust from there, you often don't adjust enough. This is called anchoring and adjustment. Even when the anchor is obviously arbitrary, it influences final estimates. Asked whether Gandhi died before or after age 9, people give lower age estimates for his actual age than if asked about age 140. The initial anchor pulls judgments toward it, even when logically irrelevant. This bias affects negotiations, predictions, and everyday judgments. Being aware of it can help. When you notice an anchor, deliberately consider whether your adjustment is sufficient. Generating alternative anchors can also help, thinking through different starting points to see how they influence your judgment. Every numerical estimate you make is potentially anchored, and conscious awareness can help you break free from that anchor's gravitational pull. Your attachment style influences adult relationships. The bonds you formed with caregivers in early childhood shape how you relate to romantic partners in adulthood. Attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby and extended by researchers like Mary Ainsworth, identifies several attachment styles. Secure attachment, formed when caregivers are consistently responsive, leads to comfortable intimacy and trust in adult relationships. Anxious attachment, from inconsistent care, leads to fear of abandonment and need for reassurance. Avoidant attachment, from unresponsive caregiving, leads to discomfort with closeness. These patterns are not destiny. While they tend to persist, awareness and intentional effort can shift attachment styles towards security. Therapy, particularly approaches focused on relationships, can help. Understanding attachment illuminates why relationships feel easy for some and fraught for others. Every pattern of relating has roots in early experience, and recognizing those roots is the first step toward choosing new patterns, building security where insecurity once lived. The scarcity principle makes limited resources more desirable. When something is scarce or available for only a limited time, it becomes more attractive. This is the scarcity principle, a powerful influence on human behavior. Limited edition products, countdown timers on sales, and phrases like "only a few left" all exploit this principle. Scarcity triggers a fear of missing out and implies value. If something is rare, it must be good. From an evolutionary perspective, scarce resources like food were genuinely valuable. Today, marketers use artificial scarcity to drive demand. Being aware of the scarcity principle can help you resist manipulative tactics. Ask yourself whether you truly want something or just feel urgency because of scarcity cues. Genuine scarcity does affect value, but manufactured scarcity is often just a sales tactic. Every feeling of urgency is worth examining. Is it based on real need, or just a psychological button being pushed? Loss aversion makes losses feel worse than equivalent gains feel good. Imagine you could either gain $100 or lose $100. Most people feel more strongly about avoiding the loss than achieving the gain. even though the monetary value is identical. This is loss aversion, a core principle of behavioral economics. Losses loom larger than gains, typically about twice as large psychologically. Loss aversion influences many decisions. People hold losing investments too long, hoping to avoid realizing the loss. They avoid risks, even when potential gains outweigh potential losses. They work harder to avoid losing something they have than to gain something equivalent. Understanding loss aversion can help you make more rational decisions. Recognize when fear of loss is driving choices, and evaluate whether it's warranted. Sometimes embracing potential loss is necessary for growth. Every decision framed around avoiding loss is an opportunity to ask whether you're being overly influenced by this powerful bias. The framing effect shows that how information is presented matters. The same information presented differently can lead to different decisions. This is the framing effect. Describing a medical treatment as having a 90% survival rate sounds better than saying it has a 10% mortality rate, even though they're mathematically equivalent. Framing influences choices because it highlights different aspects of the situation. Positive frames emphasize gains. Negative frames emphasize losses. Given loss aversion, negative frames often have more impact. Understanding the framing effect can make you a more critical thinker. When presented with information, consider alternative frames. How else could this be described? Advertisers, politicians, and even well-meaning communicators frame information to influence you. Being aware lets you see past the frame to the underlying fact. Every persuasive message is framed in some way, and recognizing the frame helps you evaluate the message more objectively. Priming can subtly influence behavior without awareness. Exposure to certain stimuli can unconsciously influence subsequent thoughts and behaviors. This is called priming. Reading words related to elderly people can make you walk more slowly afterward. Seeing images related to money can make you less helpful. Priming works because it activates associated concepts in memory, making them more accessible and influential. While some dramatic priming effects from early studies haven't replicated well, the basic phenomenon is real. Context subtly shapes psychology. Understanding priming highlights how much of your behavior is influenced by factors outside awareness. The environment, the media you consume, even subtle cues around you, all prime certain thoughts and actions. Being mindful of your environment can help you shape those influences. Every cue you encounter is potentially priming something in your mind, and choosing your contexts wisely means choosing the primes that guide your behavior. The endowment effect makes you value what you own more than equivalent items. Once you own something, you value it more than you would if you didn't own it. This is the endowment effect. People demand more money to give up an item than they'd pay to acquire it. Psychologically, ownership creates attachment. The item becomes part of your extended self, and giving it up feels like a loss. Loss aversion amplifies this, making the loss of owned items particularly painful. The endowment effect explains why it's hard to declutter. That item you never use still feels valuable because it's yours. Understanding the endowment effect can help you make more rational decisions about possessions. Ask yourself, if you didn't own this, would you buy it? If the answer is no, perhaps it's time to let go. Every item you own carries psychological weight beyond its objective value, and recognizing this can free you from unnecessary attachment. Your mood influences your thinking in systematic ways. When you're in a good mood, you think differently than when you're sad. Positive moods tend to promote broad, creative, and heuristic thinking. You're more likely to see the big picture, make associations, and take risks. Negative moods, particularly mild sadness, promote narrow, analytical, and systematic thinking. You pay more attention to details and process information more carefully. Neither mode is inherently better. Each is suited to different tasks. Good moods are great for brainstorming. Bad moods can be useful for critical analysis. This phenomenon, called mood-congruent processing, shows how emotions and cognition are intertwined. Understanding this can help you match tasks to mood states, or intentionally shift mood to support the kind of thinking you need. Every emotional state is a lens that shapes not just what you feel, but how you think. Pluralistic ignorance occurs when everyone privately rejects a norm but believes others accept it. Imagine a classroom where a teacher asks if everyone understands. No one raises their hand, even though many are confused. Each person assumes everyone else understands and doesn't want to appear foolish. This is pluralistic ignorance, a situation where individuals privately reject a belief or norm, but assume others accept it, leading everyone to go along with something no one actually endorses. Pluralistic ignorance maintains all sorts of social phenomena, from unhealthy drinking culture to silence on important issues. Breaking it requires someone to speak up, often revealing that others felt the same way. Understanding pluralistic ignorance can give you courage to voice doubts or concerns. Often, you're not alone in your private thoughts. By speaking up, you may free others to do the same. Every silent agreement masks potential dissent, and one voice can shatter the illusion of consensus. Mental accounting leads to irrational financial decisions. People treat money differently depending on its source or intended use, a phenomenon called mental accounting. You might splurge with a tax refund while being frugal with salary, even though money is fungible. You might refuse to sell a losing stock because it would realize the loss, even though holding it is economically equivalent to choosing to buy it at the current price. Mental accounting creates arbitrary categories that influence spending and saving. Understanding that money is money, regardless of its source or mental label, can improve financial decisions. However, mental accounting can also be useful. Budgeting involves creating mental accounts for different purposes. The key is using mental accounting deliberately, not letting arbitrary categories drive irrational choices. Every financial decision colored by mental accounting is an opportunity to step back and ask whether the categorization truly serves your goals. Authority figures can influence behavior even when their commands are unethical. Stanley Milgram's famous obedience experiments in the 1960s shocked the world. Participants were instructed by an authority figure to administer what they believed were painful electric shocks to another person. Despite hearing screams and protests, a majority continued to the maximum voltage because the experimenter told them to proceed. While ethically controversial, the studies revealed how powerfully authority influences behavior. People defer to authority even when it conflicts with personal morals. This isn't about individual weakness, but about deeply ingrained social tendencies. Understanding this can make you more resistant to blind obedience. Authority deserves respect, but not unquestioning compliance. When asked to do something that feels wrong, it's worth pausing and questioning, even when the request comes from someone in a position of power. Every act of moral courage often involves resisting authority, and awareness of obedience pressures is the first step toward principled resistance. Conformity pressures can override personal judgment. Solomon Asch's conformity experiments demonstrated that people will agree with an obviously wrong group answer rather than trust their own correct perception. In these studies, participants judged the length of lines. When Confederates unanimously gave the wrong answer, many participants conformed, even though the correct answer was clear. Conformity isn't always bad. It enables social coordination and learning, but it can suppress truth and individuality. Understanding conformity pressures can help you resist them when appropriate. Knowing that others might be wrong, or that they might also be conforming, can give you confidence to voice your true judgment. Groups are not always wise. Sometimes the minority, or even a lone individual, is correct. Every moment of conformity is a choice, and sometimes the braver choice is to stand alone, trusting your own perception, even when the group disagrees. The availability cascade amplifies beliefs through repeated exposure. When an idea is repeated frequently, it becomes more available in memory, making people believe it's more important or true. This is part of the availability cascade, a self-reinforcing cycle where media attention to an issue increases public concern, which generates more media attention. Even false information can seem credible through repetition. This is why fact-checking matters and why echo chambers are problematic. When you hear the same claim repeatedly, it feels true, regardless of actual evidence. Understanding the availability cascade can make you a more critical consumer of information. Ask yourself, is this issue genuinely important, or does it just feel that way because it's everywhere? Distinguish between frequency of mention and actual significance. Every repeated message is potentially creating an availability cascade in your mind, and recognizing this can help you evaluate information based on evidence rather than mere exposure. The backfire effect can make corrections strengthen false beliefs. When people encounter information that contradicts their beliefs, they sometimes become more entrenched in those beliefs. This counterintuitive response is called the backfire effect. It occurs because threatening information activates defensive processing. Instead of changing their minds, people generate counterarguments, selectively recall supporting evidence, and interpret ambiguous information in belief-consistent ways. The backfire effect is frustrating because it means that simply providing facts doesn't always work. In some cases, it worsens the problem. However, research suggests the backfire effect is less common than initially thought and can be mitigated by presenting information in less threatening ways, affirming people's values first, or framing corrections as additions rather than contradictions. Understanding the backfire effect highlights the challenge of changing minds. Beliefs are not just cognitive, but tied to identity and emotion, and persuasion requires more than facts. Peak experiences can have lasting positive effects on well-being. Abraham Maslow described peak experiences as moments of intense joy, wonder, or transcendence, often involving feelings of unity, timelessness, and profound meaning. These experiences can occur during religious or spiritual moments, in nature, through art, or even in everyday life. Research shows that peak experiences can have lasting positive effects, increasing life satisfaction, personal growth, and sense of purpose. They often become defining moments in people's life stories. While you can't force peak experiences, you can create conditions that make them more likely. Being present, seeking beauty, engaging in meaningful activities, and remaining open to awe. Understanding peak experiences reminds us that some moments are qualitatively different, touching something deeper than ordinary happiness. These moments are psychological gifts, times when the boundary between self and world seems to dissolve, leaving lasting enrichment. Cognitive dissonance reduction can lead to attitude change or rationalization. When you experience cognitive dissonance, the discomfort of holding contradictory beliefs or acting against your beliefs, you're motivated to reduce it. One way is to change attitudes to align with behavior. If you find yourself behaving in a certain way, you might adjust your beliefs to justify it. This is how small commitments can lead to large ones. Once you've taken a small action, you adjust your self-concept to match. making larger, aligned actions more likely. However, dissonance can also be reduced through rationalization, dismissing contradictory evidence or minimizing importance. Understanding dissonance reduction explains why people sometimes change in unexpected ways and why harmful behaviors can be justified. It also suggests a strategy for personal change. Act in accordance with desired values, even in small ways, and watch attitudes shift to align. Every action shapes belief, and behavior can be a powerful tool for belief change. The Dunning-Kruger effect describes unskilled people overestimating their competence. People with limited knowledge or skill in a domain often overestimate their competence. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect. Ironically, the knowledge required to be good at something is often the same knowledge needed to recognize how much you don't know. Beginners lack the metacognitive ability to accurately assess their performance. As people gain expertise, they often become more aware of complexity and less confident in their assessments. The Dunning-Kruger effect explains why novices can be overconfident, while experts are more humble. It's a reminder that confidence and competence don't always align. Understanding this effect can foster intellectual humility. When you feel very confident, especially in an area where you're relatively inexperienced, it's worth questioning whether your confidence is warranted. Every area where you feel certain might be an area where you lack the knowledge to recognize your ignorance. The illusion of explanatory depth reveals gaps in your understanding. Ask someone to explain how a zipper works or how a helicopter flies. Most people feel they understand until they try to explain in detail, at which point they realize their understanding is shallow. This is called the illusion of explanatory depth. You feel you understand complex systems because you're familiar with them, but actual understanding is often superficial. This illusion affects everything from political opinions to consumer choices. You might feel informed about an issue but struggle to explain mechanisms or implications. Recognizing the illusion of explanatory depth can promote intellectual humility and curiosity. It's an invitation to move from familiarity to true understanding. Every confident explanation you give is worth testing. Can you really explain it, or are you operating on an illusion? Deep understanding requires more than surface familiarity, and recognizing the difference is the first step toward genuine knowledge. Effective forecasting is often inaccurate. When you imagine how you'll feel in the future, you're engaging in affective forecasting. Research shows that people are surprisingly bad at this. You overestimate the intensity and duration of emotional reactions, both positive and negative. You think a promotion will make you ecstatic, and a breakup will devastate you. But emotions typically normalize faster than expected. This happens because of impact bias, overestimating emotional impact, and focalism, focusing too much on the event while ignoring other life factors. Understanding that effective forecasting is inaccurate can improve decisions, that feared outcome might not be as bad as you think, that desired outcome might not bring lasting happiness. Recognizing this can reduce anxiety about the future and promote more balanced decision-making. Every emotional prediction is likely somewhat off, and accepting this can bring both relief and realistic optimism. Hedonic adaptation means you get used to both good and bad changes. Whether you win the lottery or become paralyzed in an accident, studies show that after an initial period, people return closer to their baseline happiness. This is hedonic adaptation, the tendency to adapt to changed circumstances. Positive events bring temporary joy, but you soon take them for granted. Negative events bring temporary distress, but you adjust. Hedonic adaptation is both blessing and curse. It provides resilience in the face of adversity, but also means that achievements bring less lasting joy than expected. Understanding hedonic adaptation can shift priorities. Instead of chasing major life changes for happiness, focus on ongoing practices and relationships that provide sustained meaning. Gratitude practices can also combat adaptation by keeping attention on what you have. Every new normal, whether better or worse than before, becomes simply normal through adaptation, and recognizing this can reshape how you pursue well-being. The self-reference effect enhances memory for information related to yourself. Information is better remembered when you relate it to yourself. This is the self-reference effect. When learning names, you'll remember them better if you think about how each person relates to you. When studying material, relating it to personal experiences enhances retention. The self-reference effect occurs because the self is a rich, well-organized structure in memory. Connecting new information to it creates more retrieval pathways. This effect has practical implications for learning. Personalizing material makes it stick. Instead of passively reading, actively consider how concepts relate to your life. Understanding the self-reference effect also highlights how deeply self-focused human cognition is. The self is a central organizing principle of memory and thought. Every piece of information filtered through personal relevance becomes more memorable, demonstrating that learning is not just about the material, but about connection to the learner. Positive illusions can promote mental health despite inaccuracy. Most people hold slightly inflated views of themselves, believing they're above average in various domains, that they have more control than they do, and that the future will be better than it probably will be. These positive illusions contradict the traditional view that mental health requires accurate reality perception. Research by Shelley Taylor suggests that moderate positive illusions actually promote well-being, motivation, and resilience. They buffer against depression and anxiety. However, extreme distortions can be harmful, leading to poor decisions and social problems. The key is balance. Mildly optimistic self-views that motivate without causing delusion. Understanding positive illusions challenges the idea that rationality equals health. Sometimes, a slightly rose-tinted view serves you better than harsh objectivity. Every slightly generous self-assessment might be psychologically adaptive, helping you persist and maintain hope in an uncertain world. The planning fallacy makes you underestimate how long tasks will take. When estimating how long a project will take, people consistently underestimate, even when they know they've underestimated similar tasks before. This is the planning fallacy. It occurs because people focus on the best-case scenario, neglecting potential obstacles and delays. It's also influenced by motivated reasoning, wanting tasks to take less time. The planning fallacy affects everything from personal projects to large infrastructure initiatives. Understanding it can improve planning. Instead of asking how long you think something will take, consider how long similar tasks took in the past. Build in buffers for unexpected delays. Use outside view, considering base rates, rather than inside view, focusing on this specific case. Every timeline you create is likely too optimistic, and adjusting for the planning fallacy can lead to more realistic and less stressful project management. The false consensus effect makes you overestimate how much others agree with you. You tend to assume that others share your beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors more than they actually do. This is the false consensus effect. If you prefer tea over coffee, you might overestimate the number of tea drinkers. If you support a political position, you might assume it's more popular than it is. The false consensus effect occurs because your own view is highly available and salient, and you tend to associate with like-minded people, creating a biased sample. Understanding this effect can promote empathy and reduce polarization. Others may see the world very differently than you do. Your view is not necessarily the common or obvious one. Recognizing that you might be in the minority, even when you assume consensus, can foster intellectual humility. Every assumption of agreement is worth questioning, opening space for genuine understanding of diverse perspectives. The projection bias makes you overestimate the stability of your preferences. When you're hungry, you stock up on groceries, buying more than you need. This happens because of projection bias, the tendency to project your current preferences onto your future self. You assume that how you feel now is how you'll feel later. When you're cold, you can't imagine being too warm. When you're happy, you underestimate future sadness. Projection bias affects many decisions, from shopping to life choices. You might choose a career based on current interests, underestimating how much your passions might change. Understanding projection bias can improve decision-making. Recognize that your future self may have different preferences. Try to make decisions that account for variability in your states and preferences. Every current feeling is temporary, and decisions based on assuming that feeling will persist often lead to regret. Schemas help you organize knowledge, but can lead to stereotyping. Schemas are mental frameworks that organize knowledge about the world. You have schemas for objects, like what a dog is, events, like what happens at a restaurant, and people, like stereotypes about groups. Schemas are essential for efficient processing. They allow you to fill in gaps, make quick judgments, and navigate the world without analyzing everything from scratch. However, schemas can also distort perception. They lead you to notice schema-consistent information and ignore inconsistencies. Stereotypes are schemas about social groups, and while they can contain kernels of truth, they overgeneralize and harm individuals by ignoring variability. Understanding schemas highlights the trade-off between efficiency and accuracy. While you can't function without schemas, you can be aware of their limitations. Every automatic judgment based on a schema is an opportunity to pause and consider whether the schema truly fits the individual case. The sleeper effect shows that message source becomes less influential over time. When you hear a message from a non-credible source, you initially discount it. But over time, you may forget the source while remembering the message, leading the message to become more persuasive. This is the sleeper effect. The dissociation between message and source grows with time. While initially you think, that's from an unreliable source, so I don't believe it, eventually you just remember the message itself. The sleeper effect has implications for propaganda and misinformation. Even messages from questionable sources can influence beliefs if enough time passes. Understanding the sleeper effect suggests the importance of actively connecting messages to sources, especially when evaluating credibility. Don't just remember claims. Remember who made them and why they might have said it. Every message carries an origin, and holding that origin in mind protects against undue influence from unreliable sources. Your sense of control influences stress and coping. Perceived control, the belief that you can influence outcomes, profoundly affects well-being. People who feel they have control over stressors experience less anxiety and better health. Even the illusion of control can help. Nursing home residents given control over small decisions showed improved health compared to those without such control. Control doesn't eliminate stressors, but it changes how you experience them. Stressors feel less threatening when you believe you can respond effectively. This is why autonomy is so important in workplaces and why learned helplessness is so damaging. Understanding the importance of control suggests strategies for coping, even in difficult situations. Identifying areas where you have agency, however small, can reduce distress. Every aspect of life where you exercise choice and influence contributes to a sense of efficacy that buffers against stress and promotes resilience. The actor-observer bias describes different attributions for self versus others. When you explain your own behavior, you tend to cite situational factors. When you explain others' behavior, you cite personality traits. This is the actor-observer bias. If you stumble, you blame the uneven sidewalk. If someone else stumbles, you might think they're clumsy. The bias occurs because you have more information about your own situational constraints, and because you observe yourself from the inside, aware of how circumstances influence you, while you observe others from outside, seeing just behavior. The actor-observer bias can lead to unfair judgments and interpersonal friction. Being aware of it encourages more charitable interpretations. When someone behaves badly, consider their situation. When you behave badly, also consider your personal responsibility. Every judgment of behavior, your own or others, is filtered through this bias, and correcting for it promotes both fairer treatment of others and greater personal accountability. Mindfulness reduces rumination and enhances present moment awareness. Rumination, repetitively focusing on problems and negative feelings, maintains depression and anxiety. Mindfulness, the practice of non-judgmental present moment awareness, offers an alternative. Instead of getting caught in thought loops about past or future, mindfulness brings attention to immediate experience, sensations, breath, sounds. Research shows mindfulness reduces rumination and breaks the cycle of negative thinking. It doesn't suppress thoughts, but changes your relationship to them. You observe thoughts without identifying with them or following them down rabbit holes. This creates psychological distance and flexibility. Mindfulness-based interventions have proven effective for depression, relapse prevention, and stress reduction. Understanding mindfulness as a skill that can be developed through practice offers hope. You're not stuck in rumination. Through gentle, repeated practice of returning attention to the present, you can train a mind that rests more easily in the now, rather than churning through worries about then. The hindsight bias makes events seem more predictable after they occur. After an event happens, you often feel you knew it would. This is hindsight bias, the tendency to perceive past events as having been more predictable than they actually were. Once you know the outcome, you reconstruct your memory to emphasize factors that support it, making it seem inevitable. Hindsight bias affects learning and judgment. It can lead to overconfidence, since you think you're better at prediction than you are. It can also lead to unfair evaluations, judging past decisions harshly because you know outcomes those decision-makers didn't know. Understanding hindsight bias can improve humility and fairness. When evaluating past decisions, try to remember the uncertainty that existed at the time. When something happens, resist the urge to claim you knew all along. Every event seems obvious in retrospect, but that's an illusion created by hindsight bias, not evidence of predictive skill. And so, dear listener, our journey through the wonders of the mind comes to a close. From the patterns of neural firing to the subtle influences of social context, from the biases that shape perception to the emotions that color experience, we have wandered together through the landscape of human psychology. We have glimpsed the mechanisms underlying thought and behavior, felt the weight of evolutionary heritage in modern minds, and traced the invisible forces that guide daily life. The mind reminds us that existence is complex, layered, and endlessly fascinating. It shows us both the limits of rationality and the depths of adaptation. Every thought you have is a product of billions of neurons working in concert. Every emotion you feel is a signal sculpted by evolution. Every choice you make is influenced by contexts and processes you barely perceive. As you lie here, letting your thoughts slow and your body relax. Imagine yourself as a mind at rest. Picture the quiet hum of neural activity, the gentle waves of consciousness receding, and the endless patterns of psychology settling into stillness. See the connections between neurons, synapses firing in diminishing cascades, thoughts drifting like leaves on a quiet stream, all of it flowing into peace, into rest, into dreams. The mind has carried countless generations before us, and it will carry countless more. Its story is not finished, and in learning about it, neither is ours. Just as waking gives way to sleep, every conscious thought drifts gently into unconsciousness. If you happen to still be awake, you can go ahead and rest when you are ready. But if your mind is growing quiet, let the understanding of psychology hold you and carry you softly into rest. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and drift into sleep, into stillness, into the vast and timeless quiet where consciousness itself dissolves. Good night.